Come on.
I left the city, I've been browsing, treading water that they drowning. My head on a swivel, yeah. It's only really my surroundings.
Hello and welcome to episode 136 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at DynastyDadFF. John joining me as always, but this time for you guys watching on YouTube, we are in matching outfits. Didn't try it, honestly, John. Didn't even plan it. On Wednesdays, we wear pink. On Tuesdays, we wear matching white hoodies. How you doing, brother?
Doing good, and let the record show that I had it first. I've had this white hoodie for quite some time now, and I couldn't believe it when he jumped on there. I mean, we've been doing this a long time now. We're kind of like these old veterans in the industry, but I never expected to start wearing the same stuff as you onto the pod.
We're starting to look the same. We're starting to finish each other's sentences. Oh, hey, that's where it is. Guys, I'm super excited about our guest tonight. You know, like I started my Dynasty journey in 2014. A friend was like, hey, you got to listen to this podcast. And I started my first league playing in 2015. And this was the first podcast that I ever listened to. It was Under the Helmet. And it's just a pleasure to welcome onto the show the legend himself, Chad Parsons. How you doing tonight, brother?
Thanks for having me on again. And white hoodies are, let's call it the eclectic way of team building in Dynasty. So it's a start two league, and we already have two starters in you two right here.
That's right.
Yeah, it's an acquired taste. You know, it gets things going there. So Chad, you know, I know you talk your intro is phenomenal, but I love where you're saying you're reaping rewards for the next decade. This 2023 class, I think every year we start to say, hey, this class looks phenomenal, and then it sours a little bit. And I think we do that every single year. Tell me your initial reaction right now to you know, what the 23 class looks like, because, you know, a year and a half ago we were saying, hey, you know, 1 through 12, this thing is phenomenal. It's going to be deeper. It's going to be better than 2022. And then we get there and people start picking out those warts. And I feel like it's a cyclical thing, you know, and I know you guys talk about those kind of things at Under the Helmet, but it feels like every year we're like, hey, here we are. And then they start looking into next year and people are trying to sell for 2024. And it's like, we got to, at some point, stop the cycle.
Yeah, I think it really differs whether it's quarterback premium or start one. I think in start one that we're looking at an environment that's pretty similar to a year ago. I actually figured out a way to start looking at 2 to 3 year windows to start a career. Let's face it, by year 3, year 4, we've already decided if these players are good or not. And that doesn't mean to say that they might bounce back after a bust track start or cool off, you know, like a Doug Martin or someone like that. So, But in general, I think we decide how good a class is within 2 seasons, if not 3 seasons at the most. And so I figured out a lot of ways to start looking at profiles. And so looking at team strength, I actually have a Dynasty rookie draft decision-making matrix, and it looks at these different profiles, and you put the players into the buckets based on their profile, their pedigree, and their position. And one quarterback, it looks about like last year, which is weaker, you know, in the top 6, let's say, and then the top 12, some of these big markers that we look at. Superflex, though, looks a lot better, you know, than last year. And I think the quarterbacks help. Let's rewind 12 months with Kenny Pickett, not in the top 16, not in the top 10, nowhere near the draft pedigree we want. And that was it. All the other guys faded down. We're going to have 4 quarterbacks in the top 10 and probably much higher than that. That's a huge difference, a huge shot in the arm for these mid-first round picks, as well as, I mean, if you get a look at 107, 108, 109, even if it's Will Levis going at, you know, late in the top 10, that still is a good pedigree bet. And he might even fall Josh Allen-like to the early second round or something like that in a super flex rookie mock. So I think that between having a chance at 2 running backs in the first round, a few wide receivers in the first round, and 2 tight end drafts, it's going to be great. So I think that it looks a lot better with the more premiums you have, quarterback and tight end. I do think there's going to be a fall off, and I do think early thought is the late first round in a start one quarterback league might be a good idea. Not now, not today, unless you get a great deal, but when you're closer to on the clock, maybe you're dealing 110 way down to like 301 and you're picking up a future first, just because I think the fall off and you say, the round 1 wide receivers are gone, I'm not going to press the issue at day 2 running back. I really think you have to be careful in the late first as it currently sets up this year.
I love that. I mean, with last episode of, we have a secondary pod now of Smash or Pass, we went over those one quarterback drafts. And when you're so used to playing Superflex, you look at those one quarterback drafts and then you get to 107 and you're like, ooh, all right, this is a different game, right? Like, this is completely different. You mentioned the quarterbacks. I'm going to talk about that first, but we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about when, 2 years ago you hopped on here for the Dynasty Dad roast, and you told me when I turned 40, these things are going to start. And I was like, yeah, okay, Chad, whatever. Now I'm 41, almost 42, and man, I'm starting to feel some of these back pains we were talking about, some of those foot. I absolutely loved when you came on here and roasted me, and we're gonna get John and I were kind of making fun of each other backstage for some of those kind of things. Leading from that into being one of the OGs in this industry, like you got to jump out there, but even before podcasts were big. And talk to me about how you've stayed relevant over the years, because there's so many different podcasts. I mean, it is saturated right now. Like, there are so many podcasts and so many different YouTube channels. And tell me what has made Under the Helmet so popular and something that has lasted for years. And also tell everybody, what they can find over if they aren't familiar with you.
Yeah, I would say it's always a journey as a content creator. I've been a one-man shop there at UTH in terms of, you go there, you listen to a podcast, you read an article, you look at rankings. 99.8% of the time, it's me. And that can be a challenge because it's a full-time job, but it also means you're doing everything. But I would say, going over the years, that things I've come up with that I feel differentiate me is I'm not afraid to record a 5-minute podcast. I think a lot of people assume a podcast. I think there was some study that the average or the ideal length is 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it is. And I think, say what you got to say. And if it ends up being 9 minutes, I just recorded something on Ronald Jones or, all these individual signings or movement in free agency. Record a show. Do you think it fits better as an article or a podcast? Ask yourself these questions. I've been very innovative in terms of how I display dynasty rankings. I believe listing 1 through 50 isn't all that productive. I do tiers. I put in a lot of other data instead of a little line, a little snippet that says, I like this guy, I don't like this guy. I think you can provide more value. So I think it's always thinking of ways to improve the experience for the consumer. And the other part is, my go-to line is saying I operate UTH like an old 1980s hardware store. I know everybody's name. When Joe comes in, I know he's looking for a hammer. I know he uses Phillips head instead of, a traditional screwdriver. So I get to know my customer really well. I answer my own emails. I don't outsource that. And I'm really not looking to, flash and dash, gain as many listeners and subscribers as possible. The whole thing is about retention. So when you go back 5 to 10 years, it's about retaining what you have and slowly growing. I added Patreon over the years to supply something for super fans. I added premium podcasts when people were just getting up to speed with having one weekly show. I was already doing 4, 5, 6 a week. And so find out what your niche is. And I would say just really value the relationship and build that with a customer. And if it's one email, if it's answering a trade question, getting back in a timely fashion. I do custom draft boards for the Superfan subscribers that sign up to the trade calculator. All these little micro actions that it might take a few minutes here, 30 seconds here, checking my phone periodically throughout the day to for the VIP chat room. All these little things build up to a sustainable solo business model, that it allows us to do what we love. And so I think being self-analyzing and saying, how can I be better than I was a year ago? All those things go together with saying, I want to know all the subscribers and I want to grow it slowly, as opposed to, I want to get as many listeners as humanly possible. And I hear that from podcasters a lot. They care about that final number when it's like, do you want that many people listening? Do you really think after 4 shows, you're ready for the prime time? Because you get one listen and they're going to go somewhere else. As you said, there's a billion podcasts. So I think you have to be careful on how big of an audience you want. I had 20 people, including my dad, as the story goes, for the first UTH show way back in 2011. And frankly, I think that was a little high. My dad, he was required to listen. Everybody. Yeah. But the 8 to 10 was probably about the right number. And then it grows to dozens and hundreds and things like that. So I think you have to really seek to improve before you start worrying about subscribership. And one other thing I would say is, charging is an icky word and people have a problem with it. But here's what I'll say. If you're doing the right thing, you're treating customers well, you're providing valuable content, you're making a difference to their leagues, just know people are going to value that, and they want to pay because they don't want you giving it everything away for free. So just know it's a two-way street. And what I've learned is the super fans want to reward you and you to keep doing what you're doing. So don't be afraid to charge. When I opened the UTH Dynasty site, I charged within weeks of opening. And a lot of people at that point in time were going a year or two of just everything's free. And then sometime they go, please, maybe kind of, sort of subscribe to this membership. And you might lose. You don't know until you start charging if you have anything sustainable. And I think the earlier you have that answer, the better.
And that's awesome. I mean, we launched our Patreon this in the last year, and you know, it's just, I have had my DMs open for years and answered trade questions, and I love that kind of thing and getting to know people on the one-on-one basis. And that's just, I'm glad to hear you say that. You know, there's so many people that are out there wanting to see where they are on charts or where they are with this number or that number, and
let
the
them
personal
say thank
relationships.
You.
Yeah.
Let those super fans say thank you. And there's plenty out there that want to reward you for the hard work you do every day.
That's awesome, Chad. I love it. First thing I want to jump in, and you started talking about those quarterbacks. So Mel Kiper's mock draft came out today, and let's just, we take those with a grain of salt, but it's part of the process. You know, we're a little over a month away from the NFL draft, and he has it right now as C.J. Stroud going 1, Carolina, Bryce Young going 2 to Houston, Will Levis get the Colts trading up to get Will Levis at 3, and Anthony Richardson going to Seattle at 5. So first off, I got to ask you, Chad, I mean, this is a position, you know, even NFL teams don't get it right. You know, this is the most difficult to predict. What running backs, wide receivers, there's a lot in your model that, you know, is a lot more predictive. What do you look at from the quarterbacks right off the bat, and who is your favorite going in right now? I mean, I have so many people, you know, Bijan's the clear favorite. Everybody's taking him at 1. But then when we get to this quarterback, there's that tier of 2, 3, and 4 where these 3 quarterbacks, and then we're going to talk about a couple other guys, but this is where we're really struggling. It's just trying to figure out who's who.
Yeah, I think one overarching thought, we talk about it on the Football Guys show with Jordan McNamara, I would say at least a couple times a month, especially this time of year, which is if you're sitting there and you say, I need to quote unquote fix quarterback for my Superflex Dynasty team. And it's like, I got 102, I got 104, you know, some early pick. And you go, you know, who should I pick at quarterback? We always talk about, well, have you tried trading? You know, have you tried trading for an NFL option already? Because inherently, NFL teams get this wrong. And that's not even to say getting it right NFL terms means you got it right dynasty-wise with some big, massive ceiling. So I think there's 2 divides there of job security that can go against you. And then you also have just dynasty successful. Because if you finish a couple times at QB 10, yes, it matters, but no, that doesn't really move the needle in an impactful way as much as you think, especially if you spend a high first-round rookie pick and you passed on, say, a round 1 running back or a wide receiver that turned into, you know, the trajectory someone like Garrett Wilson's on or Chris Olave or Drake London right now, and you passed on that for Kenny Pickett. I mean, just as examples here, you know, there's different levels to what is I did well with my quarterback pick in a Superflex draft. So I think that the interesting part for me this year is rushing pays the bills. And it's interesting because the 2 guys with the highest rushing potential are the 2 guys not viewed consensusly by the NFL as QB1 and QB2. So they have more risk, quote unquote, with the NFL of holding a job, keeping a job, maintaining that, becoming a franchise guy in Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. More so Richardson than Levis for the upside part. And then you have, well, I think this might work out NFL-wise, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. However, I don't project them as rushing options, rushing enough to actually matter for Dynasty. And guess what? We don't think Mahomes as like a pure runner. He runs quite a bit. Not like Josh Allen, not like Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields, but enough. And so if you're falling behind, you've got to be so good as a passer to end up in the top 5 or 6 of the position right now that I actually don't have. And we were just looking at mock drafts and things like that. I don't have quarterbacks in the 1 or 2 spots. Bijan Robinson isn't a surprise, but I just think that there's a lot of sameness. And I also think that Anthony Richardson is the real fantasy, like he can do what Justin Fields just did. And we can have a lot of questions about, is he a good quarterback? Is he a good NFL option? Is he a good passer? All that applies. But look, he's a top 8 fantasy option without any of that stuff. We'll see if he turns into Jalen Hurts. We'll see if he puts it all together. But Anthony Richardson can show up and be a 1,000-yard rusher. And that's not really a question mark. And yet Stroud and Young are considered safer because of where they are in their passing progression. So I think in rookie drafts, it really is one where I think you almost have to be a little agnostic about the player. 101 quarterbacks have the benefit over 102 and beyond in NFL pedigree terms. And right now the betting market is on CJ Stroud to be the 101 for Carolina. However, I think the Anthony Richardson, if he ends up being QB3 off the dynasty board, is probably the better play. So I think you have to keep that in mind of if Bryce Young is successful and he ends up, with a QB10 season, he starts off as his rookie year as QB24, and then, he's QB10 within the next 2 years. Is that worth 101 or 102 in a rookie draft? I'm not so sure, and so I think you have to be really careful with projecting the ceiling when 102 can get you a lot of places. Trading that around and shopping it by 102 for Justin Herbert, 102 and a little something for someone of that ilk. You take a lot of risk out for a guy that's already played and has already shown their mettle in the NFL.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, right now we've been advocating to trade back a little bit, try to get into that 104, 105, 106 range from the 102 and add. And I've seen absolutely crazy offers of people moving from 102 to 106 and getting a 24 first. And imagine, Richardson or Gibbs or JSN at that point on top of a CJ Stroud, and you're in a position to win.
Well, and just to put a name to what you're saying in a trade like that is you're doing the pick math. And I do that all the time. You say, well, I'm trading to 6. Well, what does 6 mean? Well, I'm guaranteed this. Say 2 running backs, three quarterbacks, and wide receiver 1. That gets you to 6 already. So that means you're not even picking QB4 for your board or whoever you're thinking. So you could maybe go to 7. You can maybe go to 8. If there's 2 or 3 wide receivers you want, and that's how deep it is when you start adding premiums. And if it's 2 tight end, you can expand that maybe a little bit more. So I think you're on the right track of saying, do I like one quarterback enough if I'm sitting at 2 or 3 to say, I got to stick here? Because you're saying a first is possible to trade back just a little bit and someone else is getting their choice of quarterbacks. It's almost like the NFL, right? I mean, it's sitting in the 102, 103 seat and saying, we like 3 guys and we're going to get a discount. We're not going to pay what Carolina paid to move all the way up. Same thing applies to trading up to 102 in your super flex draft as opposed to sitting at 4, 5, or 6. Because again, the highest upside guy in Richardson may be the 2nd or 3rd or quarterback off the board. And we saw that in the mock draft information you gave me.
I like that. As far as John, when we're talking about, is there a landing spot? Like we're talking about if CJ Stroud goes to Carolina, which I love, that all 5 offensive linemen are back. You got Frank Reich there. You got McCown, who's been a guy who has helped develop quarterbacks as well. It's like, I think that's an ideal spot, but is there another landing spot out of this? I mean, we're looking at, out of those teams, you look at Houston, you look at the Colts, you look at Seattle, who's that spot you want to see these guys go into? And if Stroud goes 1, where is that spot that Richardson or Bryce Young have to go, or even Levis to move into that, 102 spot for you?
Yeah, and Chad may also have some thoughts on this. I think first off, I like what you were saying there, Chad, about we think about Bryce Young and CJ Stroud as being the safer ones, but I think we could easily convince ourselves that Anthony Richardson actually does have a higher floor with the rushing, and depending on your league format, if it's 4 points for passing touchdowns, even more so, he might actually have that higher floor with 6-point rushing touchdowns, definitely in his future. And then again, I think you could also convince yourself with the ceiling. But what I want to see there, and getting back to the landing spot question, is I do want to convince myself that where he lands is a system and a coach that will understand how to utilize his talents, right? We see a system where it's really sitting there dropping back, primarily in the pocket and not too innovative. And, it's more about the passing game. You could convince yourself that it may not work well there. I think some of these landing spots are pretty interesting. I'm convinced like the Raiders would be pretty interesting with Josh McDaniels, and I feel like he's a guy that would understand the talent and be able to utilize it in that system. The new Colts offensive staff is a little bit of an unknown right now with Frank Reich leaving, but I do think we can convince ourselves that there's enough going on there with that offense, and keeping the defenses already honest with Jonathan Taylor, not necessarily being able to stack the boxes. With Anthony Richardson lands there, that is kind of interesting to me as well. So there's some Seattle. With old Pete Carroll there, I kind of feel like that, I don't know what you think on that one, Chad, but that one to me is actually pretty interesting for a QB. If we, of course, we just saw Geno Smith get signed there. So, okay, is he a bridge quarterback? Maybe they could give someone like Richardson some time to develop into a role with Geno Smith kind of mentoring him along the way. I kind of like that approach as well. What do you think, Chad?
Well, yeah. To distill what you just finished at is, I think Seattle and Detroit are the interesting spots, and more
Detroit would be fun.
more so from the fact that I think, we can say that we're drafting for the long term, but we've seen it in every rookie draft that folks want instant results. And especially if you're doing a draft in August, and you get tea leaves going about, Dameon Pierce starts rising up to the top 4 or 5 because he's projected to start versus where he was going in May, scenarios like that. And quarterback, when you have a guy that's behind a Jared Goff who's going to start, when behind Geno Smith, who they just gave a contract that they could have multi-year allegiance to, that I think that's going to be fascinating from is that the quarterback that falls? Because they're not projected to start right away. And, the fact that it seems like we're trending that Arizona, if they get offers, why wouldn't they be moving down? And that would lock in quarterback in the first 4, and it would make this whole thing moot. But I think if Seattle or Detroit get a quarterback not slated to start maybe at all this year, and that's not the worst thing for Levis or Richardson if that's who ends up going there, that I think it could be A, good for them, B, it could be great because you get a discount in Superflex because, again, a lot of times in year 1, unless they're running around for 500 plus rushing yards, they're not going to be great fantasy-wise. They just aren't. Yeah. And so that time that they're not starting is pretty irrelevant to us. If Bryce Young is out there week 1, does it really matter? Is he going to be in our lineups? And is he going to be providing value if he's in your lineup? Probably not. So it really, week 1 versus week 6, it doesn't really matter. But I think the trajectory you're on going into 2024 and year 2 for these guys is the important point. And I think that doesn't change. But yet I do think the possibility for us to get a late first or an early second price point on someone going to Seattle and Detroit, those are the landing spots we need, because that's how you would project them to have to wait. And then in the right circumstance, you get owners in the 106 to 110 range that they're going to go, I'm going to pass. I'm going to go for a round 1 wide receiver instead.
And that becomes that situation where in the past we've got Justin Herbert late, right? And we ended up getting Josh Allen late. And it feels like, to me, we're getting a lot of that with Will Levis right now. It's like, tremendous upside. He has the legs. He has the arm talent.
If you don't like him, you got to be in, because if he falls enough, it's the Josh Allen, clause basically. If he falls to 202, you have to take him. If you take one thing away from this show for 6 weeks from now, just remember that point. If Will Levis falls, pedigree has a price point that you have to take it.
Absolutely. I love that. The point that you made is another thing that I'm doing. I mean, I'm answering DMs nonstop about that 102, 103 range. And Chad, in your ADPs right now, when you're doing startups on Sleeper, you're looking at the 102 goes in the same area as Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson. I mean, and we know obviously what Deshaun Watson has done in the past, and Kyler and Dak. I mean, these are the quarterbacks that you can get for that 102. Or the other thing that I wanted to talk about, and I call it, you said pick trade or adding picks. I call it like cascading, or I'm sorry, not cascading. I call it insulated trades, where you move back from, say, Lawrence, Fields, Lamar Jackson, and get these guys first. Is this the class, like last year we were trying to do that, or 2 years ago we were trying to move in back off those and get those quarterbacks of Lawrence and Fields and try to load up on there. Is this the class to do that? Or is this the class that, hey, if I can get Dak Prescott for the 103, or if I can get Deshaun Watson for the 102, given the pedigree of those guys and what we've seen, what kind of moves are you making there? And I'm interested to see how you line up with how I've been thinking and kind of advising people.
Yeah. I'm looking for exactly that, because I don't look at team need, when I'm in a rookie draft, and NFL teams shouldn't be either. Yeah, I'm always fascinated when they take best player of it. Like, when you see the Eagles double and triple down on defensive linemen when they already have a bunch, or a team that's already good at the offensive line, they take another offensive lineman. All these things perk my ears up, where it's like, this is going to work out because they're taking a player superior on their board and they're not trying to fill needs. And I think dynasty owners need to do the same thing. So if you need quarterback, or you're looking to upgrade quarterback, it's not a rookie. A rookie is not going to do that. And I always say, let's shoot for foreheads. Let's aim high with, if you're sitting with a high first round pick, how about you put that together with something else? And then, another quarterback like Kirk Cousins, why don't you go after Mahomes? Why don't you go after Allen? Go after Herbert, with a high first plus other things to get it done. And I just think, and yes, those picks might get Dak Prescott or Deshaun Watson straight up. And we're talking about 28 to 30-year-olds with a profile of production. Both of those guys have, at least 3 top 12 finishes in their career. Deshaun Watson was on a trajectory with Patrick Mahomes in the same breath a few years ago before, all of his off-field stuff. And he played a partial year stepping in mid-fire, in the double-digit weeks last year. Let's give him an off-season and let's give him a fresh start. And if you want to say he's a completely different player and he's a bust and all this stuff, I think you got to give him till November this year. I mean, give him a little bit of slack here for all the stuff he's gone through. He's a 28-year-old that produced at such a high level to that point in his career arc. So yeah, I think if you have a higher first, you need to be shooting for those top 6, 7, 8 dynasty quarterbacks. And if it takes a little more than that, so be it, because I don't have my top rookie quarterback is QB 16. And it's pretty far down there. And I know folks wouldn't agree with me with having guys like Kirk Cousins or Jared Goff ahead of them, but we've seen a lot from guys. And I think the bust risk with these guys, with say Stroud and Young, when they're not going to be rushing options. We keep calling back to that UGA game with CJ Stroud. If you did it one game and you did something else for 30 games, let's not pretend like the one game is going to be what you do in the NFL when you up it 17 levels of difficulty. So I have my doubts. And Anthony Richardson, we've applauded him a few times, and Will Levis, they are huge projects as a passer. So to say that they're going to make it to a second contract and get huge money in the NFL where we truly feel secure, I have my doubts about them as well. And with 4 guys, the odds are, one probably becomes a massive hit. One becomes an okay hit. Maybe you get one that's a marginal hit, and one's going to be a bust. And the likelihood, we probably get 2 that 3 years from now are relative busts. Do you want to spend 102 on that chance? I don't. I mean, the NFL gets it wrong. Why are we going to get it right is what I would say. So playing the probabilities and playing the pedigree game, I have far more confidence of going after Lamar Jackson or Deshaun Watson or Prescott or Lawrence or Herbert. Just keep going. Even if you can't get all the way up to the absolute top, you can get to the mid QB1 range and you take all the risk out.
The other day, I suggested to someone to pair the 102 with Trey Lance because the guy's a San Francisco owner. Got Patrick Mahomes for that. Those are the kind of moves.
Nice.
I'm seeing way too much, Chad, where people are moving off Mahomes, Allen, and Jalen Hurts to try to get into this area. And it just it gets scary. I know you and Jordan talk about that a lot. Jordan's been on the show a couple of times. Talk to me about that pedigree of those top 4 or 5 super flex quarterbacks and how important that is to your dynasty team.
Well, yeah, once they hit for a top 6 season, you feel a lot better. Once they hit twice, you feel really good. Once they get that Supermax contract and they start producing, because we've seen Patrick Mahomes, everyone thought he was going to have a down year. No Tyreek Hill. Well, he seems to be just fine with a bunch of just guys at wide receiver. He was okay. Joe Burrow, he's about to get paid. Josh Allen, Herbert, Lawrence. Again, the hit rate, I had pause until this past year with Jalen Hurts, but now he's going to get the Supermax. He's produced 2 top 12 seasons. You got to be in on that, to a requisite amount. Dak Prescott's been there, done that a bunch. Watson, Jackson, we're already up to 9-10 names. So to say that you're limited in the trade market, even if some of these are on the same team for one of your competitors, you're still talking 5, 6, 7 possible trade partners. And you just mentioned, you got to go knock on that door. It might sound nuts if you're in one cross section of dynasty where you go, oh yeah, I gave a high first and Trey Lance for Mahomes, but that deal gets done. And you don't know unless you knock on the door. And if you've ever, I have not, but if you go around selling vacuum cleaners, knocking on doors, you're going to get 95% of people saying, get out of here. Did you read the no trespassing sign? Or if you cold call or anything like this, but you get to the yeses by hearing the no's, so I think the other part is people get super sensitive when you send offers that might seem, this team might want a quarterback plus a pick or, help out at another position. And you start putting a package together. And I got Justin Herbert for, 5, 6, 7 different Devy players plus Trey Lance plus something else. And it might sound nuts, but this was a team that was looking to shake it up, add some depth, which depth doesn't really matter that much. But I got Justin Herbert. I would have thought that those types of iterations and counteroffers would have gone through. And again, you can't get insulted or hurt feelings because someone else is going to snap accept an offer that another person is going to send a pretty snarky remark that it was an inappropriate offer to send. And you have to get immune to that and get active and start doing the work, because otherwise you sit around here and you've gone the whole offseason without making moves.
Just missed the catchphrase there. It's smash accept.
Yeah,
Come
snap.
on, you're on smash.
let it
We
go.
can't do the snap. Yeah, we'll let it go this time. No, I'm just
I'm still on the vacuum cleaner thing though. These vacuum cleaners really suck. 95% of the people, get out here. But there's gonna be. Well, tell me more. Tell me how much do they suck?
Throw potting soil on their carpet.
Yeah, that's right.
You're going to need to
Stuff
clean
on-
this up.
stuff
I
on
don't
the
think your
carpet.
vacuum cleaner is going to do it. Well, you don't have any mobile quarterbacks on your roster. Trey Lance is the fix.
That's the
Oh, I
one
got
you got to
something for
have.
you.
Yeah, he's a tricky one. One that isn't, and I want to talk about is we have so many people asking about Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like he's got his pro day coming up tomorrow. What does he need to do as far as run his 40 and show what he has? Or, there's a lot of people asking, he only had 1 year of production. It was phenomenal production. So where does he in your dynasty ranks? What does he have to do tomorrow? And can you take him above any of these three quarterbacks depending on what your situation is right now?
I think he needs to avoid the catastrophic. I'll start there. So like a 4.65, something like that. And what I've heard, Ohio State's a fast track. The odds of him doing so, he may not run the 4.4s, but 4.5 something is a relative lock.
That's fine.
And here's the other thing. The whole quicker than fast, the Mike Mayock line that we miss hearing now after, he hasn't been back with NFL Network, but he ran a 6.5 3 cone, which is exactly what you want for a guy that played about 90% of the time in the slot. He has the lowest drop rate of any of the notables that are going to go probably in the top 50 of the draft at wide receiver this year. So sticky hands, over 3 yards per route run, efficient. He was out producing, Olave and Garrett Wilson and, that loaded Ohio State team. So I don't think he really has to show all that much. He checks a lot of the boxes that you're looking for of change of direction. He's going to be a guy that can play on the outside, but probably going to play on the inside a lot. And I do think the Amon-Ra St. Brown mock and comp spectrum fits. And I do comps a little more granularly than a lot of people just throwing out, oh, he plays in the slot. Oh, he's, not super fast. Let's throw out Amon-Ra St. Brown because, he's super successful, and let's draw that comparison pretty easily. But I think when you talk round one, and if he runs really well, could it be top 10, top 15? That's in play. But, round one pedigree with a guy that he's not 180 pounds, sorry, Jalen Hyatt, sorry, Zay Flowers. I mean, there's some undersized guys this year, but Jackson Smith-Njigba is not that. And so I don't think he has to prove a whole lot. His most important drills he already did. And I don't think the 40 time is going to be the most impactful one. Now, I have him behind the top quarterbacks, and it's mostly just there's risk in round one wide receivers. They're about a 50-50 bet. So are quarterbacks, but when you're playing in Superflex, you tell me what has more value, hitting on a quarterback or hitting on a wide receiver. I'm going to say it's the quarterback. And so I'm a huge Quentin Johnston fan. So the reason he's not wide receiver one for me is because I like Quentin Johnston so much. Now I do have him in the same tier, and I do have a pretty big tier break between those two and the rest of the wide receiver position. So Smith-Njigba to me belongs in the mid first, and that's just because I think the quarterbacks have enough pedigree. I also think that people aren't giving enough respect maybe to Jahmyr Gibbs because he has outs to be a round one drafted wide running back, and he ran the 4.3s. What else do you want other than him weighing in at an unrealistic 210 plus pounds? So if you're talking about a guy that could get round one pedigree, look at those teams in the late first: Eagles, Chiefs, Bills. I mean, they're juggernaut teams that. They're unlikely to get Bijan Robinson. They're more likely to have a look at Jahmyr Gibbs. And so I think right now you can't rule out Gibbs getting round one pedigree. And I would also say if you have a round one running back, you can't put that guy very low at all. So I don't think you can put Gibbs below Smith-Njigba or Quentin Johnston right now, or some of those quarterbacks, just because he has a decent shot to go round one. And until we get affirmation that he's not going, and that'll be draft night, then I think we can start recalibrating our board and saying, well, I'm going to have Gibbs behind Smith-Njigba and Johnston and maybe a quarterback or two. That's going to shake up the board. But right now he does have outs. So that's why I have Smith-Njigba more in the 5, 6, 7 range as opposed to, say, 3 overall.
I love it. I love it. One of the guys from our Patreon, FFB Russ, that's Brian Russell, he said, how much does draft capital matter or landing spot? We sometimes draft talent over landing spot, but then we have the cautionary tale of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Like you said about Gibbs, let's say Gibbs goes to the Chiefs. The internet's going to break. But this seems like we're talking about the RB2 in the class, as opposed to the year Clyde Edwards-Helaire came out. He was RB6 range. He gets that draft capital and he shoots up. So talk a little bit about that, cautionary tale of taking a guy landing spot over talent in your evaluation?
Yeah, I think when you have enough pedigree, the landing spot doesn't matter quite that much. I will say that it's pretty ambiguous at wide receiver. I would say in general, you would love to get, as opposed to someone going at 14 overall, I think you would rather have them connected to a strong quarterback, and that generally means going later in the first round. If the pedigree checks out, I think what you brought up about Edwards-Helaire is pretty valid, where he got round one, but the problem is that we had some juggernaut profiles. Jonathan Taylor goes after him, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins. These are superior profiles. And so the Chiefs had their look at all those guys, and it comes out, I can't remember if it was then or later on, that, Mahomes basically vouched for the guy, and that's who he wanted. I think they're going to revoke his drafting privileges now. Because I just keep imagining from that day, any of those running backs, can you imagine Dobbins in there or Jonathan Taylor? I mean, they would have won another Super Bowl. So, I mean, just unbelievable stuff. But I do think, Jahmyr Gibbs, we are talking about him in that range. I think in general, we overblow the landing spot. And I think you need to focus on the pedigree, focus on the number. Where did they go in the draft? Like, if you told me right now the numbers, and that doesn't include trades, if I didn't know draft order at all by the NFL teams, if you just gave me the numbers, I can make you a big board right now. And I bet it would be razor close. Outside of the first, once we get beyond the top 25 or so, when you get to the third, fourth round of rookie drafts, you need to take shots on guys that you think you're going to keep in November, not 2 years from now, because you need to be very, very open to moving on from them quickly. So situation matters a lot. You're going to look for running backs that could be the number 2, make the 53, be relevant as a rookie if an injury occurs, all those types of things. You can't take a round 5 wide receiver and go, I'm going to sit on this guy till 2025. You just can't do it in 95% of dynasty leagues. So that's where I think people get a little handsy with situation. And in general, I think you need to stick with the probabilities, as Jordan likes to call it, base rates. I just call it, probabilities, where, round 3 wide receivers generally do this, round 2 running backs generally do this. You put them into buckets. You can have your preferences. You can shake them up in the Boggle Cup there, and have your favorites. But that needs to be the general roadmap. And I always go by that when I'm adjusting the big board after, say, the combine or after the NFL draft, where there's certain parameters. And one lesson, just to name one guy from last year, Isaiah Spiller was a guy that I really did. I'm going to harken back to and learn a historical lesson, because you cannot have, and this is the danger we mentioned at the top of the show, a one quarterback league. It falls off. You don't have the premiums. You're not going to sit there at 110 and want to take a quarterback. You're not going to generally take a tight end either. That hasn't worked out well. And so you can't have, sitting at 111, take your favorite day 3 running back. Or Isaiah Spiller sometimes, is at 202, 203. It's just too early. You can't do it. So if a running back, the last 20 picks of day 2 on Friday night, you should be watching intently, because the running backs that get it or don't get it, Alexander Madison got it. James Conner got it. And these guys like Isaiah Spiller that aren't going to get it, like Sean Tucker may be a big watch for us this year if he gets it or doesn't get it. Someone like Zach Evans. And if you like or Tajay Spears or Israel Abanikanda, Kendre Miller, if they get day 3, you need to basically say maybe the late second round of the rookie draft. Maybe. And if they don't make it there, let someone else take them and take on that risk. It's a huge deal breaker that you just can't go high. And if that means at 204 you have no one to take, you need to trade. Or you need to look at another position and say, well, I don't think it's worth it, and you got to make a move, or if you see that coming up, maybe you're trading 204 and 210 and you're trying to get to 110 and get a much better profile. So you need to figure out other methods, as opposed to sitting there and being like, well, I like Isaiah Spiller. He didn't go in the 3rd round like I thought. He went around 4. We saw that can bury you. That can bury you in the NFL. And there's probably a reason that that they're buried, because he, ran 4.6x. That's replaceable in the NFL. Joshua Kelly had a better profile in round 4 years ago, and sure enough, he was higher than him on the depth chart. So I think at running back, you really need to make that. And then wide receiver, the line is round 2. Round 3 has horrible odds. It falls off very quickly. And frankly, you don't want to take a lot of wide receivers in rookie drafts anyway. But if you're looking at Parker Washington, if you're looking at Kayshon Boutte or Cedric Tillman, or Josh Downs is probably going to get it pretty easily. But my point is, you get these guys and you should be watching round 2 very closely. And if they fall to round 3, that's another point. You got to wait a lot longer. You can't take that guy at 201. I don't care how much you love him. So that's where I think pedigree trumps all. And if someone goes to, I just think the Amon-Ra St. Brown scenario where he falls to day 3 and he ends up being the goods. He had an elite profile, but he's one of the rare, Stephon Diggs, a few others. Yeah. It just does not work. So betting on that over and over again, you're just going to lose, and you're going to keep chasing that one scenario that worked out.
He's holding the mic there right after that. It's a mic drop. That's you're the second right major analyst to come on there, John, is, when we're wearing matching outfits, friends don't let other friends draft around 4 running backs,
That's right. That's what we do.
When Chad speaks, we got to listen up to those things. And I know that's something that you and I have been talking about quite a bit over the last couple of months as well.
Yeah, for sure. And look, we've been kind of talking about getting guys in tiers and getting a projected draft capital in there to do your tiers and rankings. But look, you're going to have to adjust based on that draft capital. And I love some of the analytics that you've been able to bring forward. That's really good advice. Be prepared for my tiers to be adjusted quite a bit based on that draft capital and watching that closely. First 2 rounds for wide receivers, first 3 rounds for running backs. I definitely agree with that. You're chasing more of the outlier after that point. I wanted to ask you, Chad, kind of following up on that. You rattled off some of these running backs that we hope will land day 2. Do you have any that you at this current point are projecting more to land in the day 2 time frame? I mean, if we just come back to Sean Tucker, Zach Evans, Kendre Miller, Tank Bigsby, maybe Tajay Spears, do any of those guys stick out for you, where you think, based on what you've seen with their profile, their athleticism, the combine, that you think are more likely to land there?
Yeah, I think it's just tough. I call a lot of mock draft data for NFL purposes. And unfortunately, one of those spots on day 2, it sounds like it's going to get taken up by Devon Achane, who is a sub-sized player, a dynamo. But let's face it, we're not going to project a big role, for him almost in any landing spot. It's really tough to thread that needle to get enough receiving volume. Is he going to be more than a 5 carry a game type of guy in a best case? So, we're really looking at Zach Charbonnet. We're looking at Tank Bigsby for probably 2 spots. I really think we're down to 1 to 2 spots max at running back that are up in the air for day 2. And I keep hearing from Mel Kiper, and it really grinds on me. He keeps saying Dwayne McBride. And Dwayne McBride, to me, he's a guy that's not going to work out. He's mentioned round 2 with him. I'll believe it when I see it. I think he's more round 3-4 fringe. And I would not, he's a 1% receiving score in my model. I would not take him, period. And a lot of it was based on, he's going to be this hulking 215, 220 plus guy. He went at 209. So 209 with a weak receiving score, anemic and historically weak, man, that's a tough sell for me. So unfortunately, it seems like Chase Brown is probably one of the favorites. I like him enough, but he's 23. He's got a well-rounded profile. So he's one that's probably has better odds. But unfortunately, between a lot of guys I like Zach Evans, Tajay Spears, Roschon Johnson, Sean Tucker, Kendre Miller, Abanikanda, that's probably the list of challengers, and maybe one gets it. And so that's so what this means, if you know that, if I just rattled off 2 or 3 guys that you really like, whatever subset of that, those need to be who of that group is going to be cheap that I can get in round 3. And it may not be your number 1 option. You may say, I love Tajay Spears, but if he costs 205 and you can get, Roschon Johnson at 307, to me, it's a no-brainer. If one of them went round 4, one of them went round 5, it's not a big deal. So I just think in general, you need to not be sticky, because those are all pretty good profiles, but who's going to be the cheapest? And I'm not going to overpay, because 205, you can go out there in the trade market and maybe get yourself someone like Mike Evans or Tyler Lockett. And then you get your running back later on, because the running backs are based on injuries and the right depth chart and making your way up and getting some spot starts. We're not going to project, a multi-year starter from any of those guys from day 3, the Lamar Miller kind of outcome. So you have to be super careful. Don't pay too much, and don't get stuck on. I mean, again, I can make arguments for 2 or 3 of those guys of saying, I love them as a player, but if they get day 3, you can't love them that much.
And I'm glad you talk about it that way, as far as that 205 doesn't have to be a player. Right now, I bought Miles Sanders for the 205 the other day, and I'm okay with that, because Miles Sanders is now, he's that guy in Carolina. He's going to put up production where sometimes you don't know. And we always say, hold your picks till you're on the clock and kind of make those kind of moves. Chad, we're looking at an ADP here, thrown together from the Discord and trying to look at some things. Who are some guys that stick out? If this is super flex to you, I'm going to go over the first round here. It's Bijan, Stroud, Young, Smith and Jigba, Richardson, Gibbs, Levis at 7, Quentin Johnson at 8, Addison 9, Charbonnet 10, Flowers 11, Downs 12. And so out of that, who's that guy that sticks out to you as a value in the first round? And who's that biggest, who are some of these guys ADP that just doesn't add up for you?
Yeah, I'll highlight 3 guys that stand out. I already mentioned Jahmyr Gibbs. So him going at 6, I think with having round 1 possibilities, we know that some people have some rookie drafts in the next month before the NFL draft. So you're making bets on pedigree as well. So Gibbs in the mid first to me is a relative steal. Yes, he's sub-sized to some degree, but he has the exact profile, elite receiver, as well as, one that runs 4.3x, big play machine. Those are the traits you want if you're not going to be 210 plus pounds. So to me, Gibbs stands out. And then I'll say Quentin Johnston. I'm a big fan of his. The fact that he's, in this ADP set, he's 3, 4, 5 picks below Jackson Smith-Njigba. Big fan of Quentin Johnson. He's the one guy with size and the one guy that, he's unbelievable after the catch. His missed tackle rate is elite. We're talking like Deebo Samuel, and it's a guy with prototypical size. So he has a lot of positives. People talk about him being a body catcher. We got Terrell Owens. We got a bunch of guys that have been body catchers. Didn't affect them a whole lot. If you got the goods, you got the goods. Okay. And so Quentin Johnson at 108 to me, it stands out. And then one other guy, when I start looking at, again, where's pedigree going? Jalen Hyatt. I'm not the biggest fan of his, but he has some Will Fuller-esque qualities, and I know he didn't run 4.32 like he wanted or anything like that. But seeing him in round 2, 203 here, or just the last guy that really has a good projection to be a round 1 wide receiver, I'm always interested in that guy. I think Kadarius Toney a few years ago was going at like 206, 208, just falling through the floor. Everyone hated that landing spot. But I think there's always a round 1 wide receiver that lasts a little too long, and it seems like Hyatt is that guy this year. So it's the same thing about like if Levis goes 111 or 205 and in a super flex, we got to be in on it. Even if you don't like Jalen Hyatt, if he goes to 203, I think you have to be interested.
Hey, I know that's the guy that I've been talking about a little bit in that range too, John, is someone that I keep encouraging you to move up a little bit. And I want to hear more what Chad has to say about Quentin Johnston, but John, who's that guy right now that's sticking out to you? I know you and I have our collective rankings that we've been putting together, in the Smash Patreon and putting out there. This is kind of more of just our overall Discord of where people have been going as far as, ADP and mock drafts. What's sticking out to you? I feel like we got to look at your guys and that guy that just seems like screaming value.
Yeah, and if I'm dipping into this ADP into the second round, we rattled off some of these running backs, but I'm looking at 205, Sean Tucker, then it's Evans, Kendre Miller, Tank Bigsby, Tajay Spears. Definitely see a ton of value there. For me, Kendre Miller at 207 and Tajay Spears at 210 definitely stick out as major values. Again, I think we need to see the draft capital. I'm hearing good things about that. For Kendre Miller, it's really more about his overall size, speed ratio, and I've seen a lot of good stuff from him on film in terms of his vision, be able to pop big plays as well. I think you could convince yourself that he could land a really nice, potentially even 3-down workload. Zach Charbonnet is getting all the love, but I'll kind of build on what Chad was talking about earlier. In this case, we got Zach Charbonnet at 110 and Kendre Miller almost a round later. Again, we'll have to see where things land, but that to me feels like value, very similar type profile. And then again, I think I'm maybe irrationally high on Tajay Spears because I know about his medical background and the risk. But wow, on film, this guy just has impressed me so much. So he has definitely become one of my guys. I hope that Chad's not going to rain on my parade here too much, but I really like his overall. I think he's an elite pass catcher from what I've seen on film. He maybe isn't going to be a 3-down grinder, but similar to Gibbs, what he does in the open field is crazy. His lateral movement, his ability to find the hole, hit it, and make the big play, both in the rushing game as well as the passing game, really impresses me a lot. I just really hope that the medicals look good at the combine, that a team's going to invest in him. But right now, sitting at 210, to me, that jumps off the page to me as a value as well.
Just running backs galore in that second round.
Yeah, Spears kind of reminds me of Jerick McKinnon a little bit. And again, not the iteration that we saw pan out over 6 to 8 years of basic frustration, but the guy that came into Minnesota, he was very tightly wound as an athlete, explosive. we always have Matt Asiato to blame in terms of not working out with all those potential spot starts. And it took him till the back half of this last year to really put it all together in the perfect system. Mm-hmm. But McKinnon was that really juicy athlete that was a little subsized, but had a lot of potential. And hopefully it works out better for Spears. But I think he's that type of athlete in that type of weight range. I did want to mention one thing, because if we go through the whole show and don't mention Hendon Hooker, based on this cost, because we talked all about the big four, and I think it's easy to create some giant concrete wall of saying there's nobody else in the class. Now, I think Hendon Hooker, he's going to go on day 2, might go round 2, and he's going to be that red shirt type, right? I mean, probably not going to play this year,
right?
But he checks every box. And we talk about, it's a black box of trying to figure out quarterback. But the things that I look for, the common traits of 101 picks in the NFL, high first round picks, he checks them all. He has no size concerns. He's athletic. He has rushing upside. He checks the box in terms of touchdown interception ratio, yards per attempt. He really has no flaws other than being old and right now being hurt. If he didn't get hurt at all, I think we'd be talking about him as a round 1 guy in the NFL, and maybe someone that a team in the 15 to 20 range, Washington, Tampa Bay, might be looking at in that range, but now they probably won't have to. But I think Hendon Hooker is going to go in that late second or third round of Superflex drafts because teams have already addressed quarterback. We talked about doing needs. You shouldn't be doing that anyway, but he's going to fall into a range where it's like, oh, let me see, upside quality profile quarterback versus day 3 running back versus, a tight end where there's no premiums going on, there's no positional value. So I think Hendon Hooker is one that, back in December, I was like, oh, I'm going to be out on Hendon Hooker. Like I watched enough Tennessee. I was like, I don't know. I'm not going to be in on that. But then you start talking about price and you're like, okay, now I'm in. It's a sort of thing where I always call it the Latavius Murray effect, where Latavius Murray, Raiders starter, don't like his price in Dynasty, and then he goes to back up around the NFL water cooler and he falls through the floor, but yet he's still a quality player. And I'm like, now I love the price. So it's kind of like David Montgomery. I'll probably love David Montgomery's price over the next 3 years, or Jamal Williams, or these types of guys. And I think Hendon Hooker's the type I expected to cost around more than this a few months ago, and now you're saying he costs 10 to 15 picks later. I'm all in on that profile. And it's almost the Jalen Hurts, right? I mean, he goes round 2 into a backup situation. We don't really care, but yet 2 years from now, we probably will care.
I can't agree with that more. I mean, Jalen Hurts, I was getting at 205 to 208 to sometimes even 212 in Superflex because we were in that area. And one of the guys in our Patreon was even asking that if Hendon Hooker gets that round 2 draft capital, let's say he goes to the Lions at dream spot, we get him in the second round or someone there. I mean, how high up should we move him? You're saying above, maybe Tucker, A-Chain, Evans, get him into that mid-second range?
Well, yeah. I mean, you just mentioned all the flimsy pedigree. We're not talking probably day 2 running backs. The only one was A-Chain, and you're talking day 2 wide receivers. So yeah, I think Hendon Hooker needs to be like, and here's the thing, like where he is on a big board, I think is largely irrelevant because ADP will tell us if you're in or out. Like I always say, if you rank a guy at 30 and his ADP is 20, you could have him at 50. It doesn't matter. The point is you're saying don't draft him. If you have a guy at 5 and his ADP is 10, you're saying draft him. And it's saying he's going to be a major part of your draft plan in league in and league out. So that's the big part for me. And I think mid-second or beyond, if he goes to an interesting spot, especially if he doesn't go to a spot with a supermax quarterback that's super established, like we've seen the Patriots before, I think they took Garoppolo, Brady was in his prime, right? Like there was really no outs for him there. It was going to be a long-term situation or he's going to injury away. But like you said, if he goes to Detroit, if he goes to Seattle, if he goes to one of these situations that could look really good in 2024, that's a really nice Jalen Hurts type spot for, again, a mobile. We're not talking about Tanner McKee. We're talking about a mobile quarterback that basically needs a red shirt health-wise. He's got the upside. He's checked the boxes. And frankly, we would have been talking about him as a first-round pick otherwise. So yeah, I think you need to be attuned to where he lands. But yeah, I think the mid-second on would be the perfect price point for Hendon Hooker.
Chad, it's been a blast. I wish we could talk for hours. When I listen to your podcast, and I mean, it's honestly, you don't disappoint. You come on here and you just dropping dimes, taking care of business. I want to thank you so much, from the Smash Accept community for you taking the time to come on and talk with us. Why don't you tell everybody, what you have going on over there at UTH, where they can find you. And, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I know John feels the same.
Yeah, thanks so much. And yeah, uthdynasty.com. It's been around since 2014. And all the content, you get articles, you get 5 to 10 minute shows. Sometimes you get half-hour shows. You hear the story and backdrop behind all the studies that I do to become a better Dynasty GM myself on an annual basis. And I think you have to play a variety of formats so that you have the metal and you have the data points to be an analyst. I think that's very important. I think it's very important to be transparent. I share all my trades on the site to subscribers. And again, uthdynasty.com. If you want premium audio content, which means not a once a week show, you get 250, 300 plus shows a year. That's a great place to go. If I haven't annoyed you with my voice yet, it's a lot of solo shows. So just be aware, you got to be okay with that part. But a trade calculator with a subscription comes as a trial. It's a standalone purchase. It's updated. It was updated daily during the free agency period. So you are always going to have the most current recommendations for player value. It blends it with ADP. It's really easy to use as a difference-making tool in your leagues. And then, like you guys, starting Patreon is a major boost for super fans. I mentioned the VIP chat room. I'm in there. A few dozen of the best dynasty owners on the planet. We're always talking trades and drafts, and you can sign up. You get a draft guide if you sign up. This is the perfect time of year to get in there, get bonus content there at patreon.com/UTH. Become a VIP, get the content. And then one thing I'll say is after the NFL draft, a lot of people are excited for their own leagues. I am as well. But Saturday, Sunday of NFL draft weekend, people are already moving on to their own leagues. By Sunday night, you will have a completed, updated draft guide, and you will have ADP, which all my super fans give to me so that I can start prepping for what our 2023 draft plan will be for target players, avoid players. And I do not go to bed. Sometimes it's been 3 a.m. Sometimes I finish early, but I will not go to bed on Sunday night until that is done. And that is my annual pledge and annual achievement. So just know I put the subscribers and listeners first every single year. And then Monday, I get on to my own leagues. So again, uthdynasty.com on all those applicable platforms.
Make sure you guys check that out. Thanks again for tuning in and enjoy the process.